you solve a customer problem, if you delight your customers, if you have if you're getting adoption and you have a clear path to revenue or you're generating revenue, the exit will figure itself out. So I don't think we've ever been too focused on, what the exit might be or what the timeline might be.
Hey everyone, I'm Debbie Madden, the host of the Scaling Tech podcast. Thanks for joining us today. Today I'm chatting with Dave Hersh. Hey Dave, how are you?
I'm good.
Awesome. So we're talking about a really interesting topic, and I'm very excited to ask you these questions. Dave has started multiple companies for startups, and so we're going to talk about his lessons learned running product management across these 4 companies. And I will say also, Dave is not only a serial entrepreneur, but he actually has worked for large companies. That's how him and I met many, many years, if not decades ago. And he's just started and successfully exited 4 companies since the late 90s. So that's really important, really interesting to our conversation. He's working with close friends from his days at Carnegie Mellon, and David has led product across these 4 businesses, driving innovations in fantasy sports, social network, business messaging, and software development. So across industry. And so let's kind of jump in here. You've been a key player in the ideation phase of 4 products. I've run as many companies as you, but I don't think I've ideated a single product idea. So I run a services company. I'm not the person to invent software consulting. And so like ideation phase across 4 products, that's wild to me. Share with us your top 3 lessons learned along the journey. And it could be 3, it could be 4, it could be 2, which kind of let's spend some time here because I'm really fascinated what you've learned and kind of how this process works in your brain. Let's start there. That could take us all half an hour maybe, but
Yeah.
let's start talking about that.
Well, it's interesting. It's been an interesting exercise sort of reflecting back across these businesses and thinking about how we've done this. And the first thing I'm struck by is, it's such a privilege to have been able to do this. Like, this is literally the fun part, right? That you get to just sit around with your friends and coworkers and, the sky's the limit. Think about what you might want to do next. And, we come up with the absolute craziest ideas and ultimately hone in on something that we can actually execute on. But, thinking back across all of those, were there lessons learned? Were there common themes? On one hand, this has been a strength of ours. Like, we've come up with pretty solid innovations across, those 4 industries. Was there a method to the madness? And I guess there's sort of 2 expressions that come to mind. One is, skating to where the puck is going. And then the other one, my friend and partner, Peter Pizarro's favorite quote is the Henry Ford quote. If I'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. And those 2 things kind of, I think, generally shape our approach to things. And, we've been good at it. And so was it just luck? Maybe. There's certainly some element of that. So it's not sure if it's a lesson learned, but we've certainly had approaches to it. And I think the biggest one has obviously been scratching our own itch. And maybe that's limiting in some ways, but it's certainly effective because if you're solving a problem for yourself, then maybe you're solving it for other people as well. And so whenever we sort of whittle down that funnel of any idea is an okay idea to start to something that we might want to execute on, we always seem to gravitate to the ones that kind of solve a problem for ourselves, whether it's fantasy sports or business messaging. And sort of after the first one, we've kind of always played to our strength. And although those 4 things sound very different, there's sort of a common thread to them, messaging and user-generated content. And, will we always stick to that? I don't know, but that's sort of been a common thread across all of our businesses. That's kind of our wheelhouse. And we've found kind of different ways to apply that contextually.
Go ahead, but I'm going to ask you this question and then you can answer it now or later. But at what point do you start to put dollars and cents toward? Do you always apply a lean startup framework to every idea? Do you run them all through a business, a lightweight business plan at some point? Or do you kind of, kind of have the idea, get some customer feedback? And like, at what point do you kind of do the business viability piece of these ideas to like kind of pick where you're going to spend your next several years?
I mean, that certainly has changed over the years. And
Interesting.
maybe this is a reflection of the fact that, our first business was started, right at the height of the internet boom, and, money began, or off to the races, the build it and they will come mentality. But over time, as we've matured as entrepreneurs and as sort of the irrational exuberance has faded away. Although maybe we're entering that again with AI. Who knows? Um, yeah. So we tend to, I do think we just focus on the ideation first, but as over time we've started to pay more attention to not so much at how we might exit, but how we might monetize. And I think we're increasingly interested in being able to monetize from customer one. And, maybe it's just from having too many businesses where, social networking back in 2003, right? Like you needed millions of users before you're even modestly successful. And that's a stressful business to undertake. So will we ever do something like that again? I don't know. But I think, enterprise SaaS, for example, is on the surface more appealing now that, you can monetize right away.
Yeah, I do like even like some of these like kind of core decisions that drive you enterprise from sorry, enterprise monetize from customer one. I think that's like that's a line in the sand. And I think it's directional, right? Like, okay, maybe you monetize a customer five, but the idea is you're not waiting to customer 1 million, right? And it's I think those kind of informed, educated guardrails like help you move forward, or else it's just too broad. At some point, you have to narrow it down. So, yeah, it seems like you have a current, like a kind of recurring theme across the industry. You may not always do it, but it's kind of like you do have expertise that you're carrying through from one to the other. And then, are there any other like kind of lessons learned or kind of guardrails in addition to like I really like monetize from customer one, and not that everyone wants to do that, but just think about, okay, how and when do you want to monetize? I think that's key in the ideation phase.
Right.
Yeah, what are there the like the big kind of guardrails that you guys think about?
I'm not sure that there are too many guardrails, and that's
And it's
kind of
not
what makes it a
right,
fun
right.
process. But I mean, there are some kind of maybe lessons learned. I mean, one interesting thing is that kind of embracing the idea that the next business idea may not come from you, and in fact, across those four ideas, four businesses, maybe one of them has come from the core group of three or four founders. All the rest have come from kind of other team members, or even people that weren't even associated with the business ultimately. And you just got to be okay with that, and also go into the process recognizing that. And so we've kind of, on one hand, there might be this instinct to, start really small and, let's get the business figured out amongst the three of us, and then we'll open it up. But we've taken a very different approach, generally speaking. We cast a wide net in that early part, in that, ideation phase, because, you never know who's going to come up with that great idea. And then, you figure out, who's actually going to be part of the team once we're ready to start executing.
Are you always ideating like in a little part of your brain, like even when you're full in implementation mode for current, or like like some people just naturally tend towards things, and does your brain always like every conversation you have, do you unconsciously always like hear an idea when it's presented to you? It's like is
A-
or
ab-
no?
Absolutely not. I'm
Okay.
100% focused on my current job as a product manager for New Relic. No, yeah, to some degree, yeah. I mean, it's kind of in you at some point. So there's always like this, kind of thing in the back of your brain. Well, that's an idea. That's an idea.
Right, right, right.
Literally, it also kind of ties into, every time we sell a business, there's, a period of time where we're either, locked in, or there's vesting or whatever. And, if you're 3 months into a 3-year lockup period, well, you're maybe not so much focused on what the next business might be.
Right, right.
But
It ebbs and flows, but it's just the It's just I think there's like a whole like behavioral economics lens here, which we're not going to dive deep into, but like people like show up to conversations like the way they like intend to show up, right? And so if your brain is thinking ideation, even if you're not in the ideation mode, you probably like again like it's subconscious, but you probably hear like 10 times as many ideas as like the average technologist would because your brain is like kind of spinning even if you don't realize it.
Well, my
Yes,
dad was a dentist, right? And he would watch movies, and he couldn't help but look at the teeth of the people
exactly.
in the movies.
Exactly. It's
Nowadays, they all have perfect teeth, but he came to it with the dentist mentality, like, oh, that bicuspid needs smart. And so, when you're an entrepreneur, everything's like a business idea, right?
everything is an idea. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love it. I love it. All right. So since the 90s, so it's been quite a while you've been doing this. What would you call out as like the best decision or decisions that you've ever made, and like the kind of the like either the worst decisions or the biggest mistakes you've made? Give us the highs and the lows that you're willing to share.
Right. There's been so many, to be honest. Yeah, it's just kind of horrific. But in terms of the best decisions, I guess there's two things that come to mind. One is sort of just kind of a big picture thing, which is just getting the band back together.
Ah, interesting.
It's all about the team. And startup life is so stressful, and it's easy to kind of look back over the past 25 years or so and say, oh, it's been awesome, I loved it. But you tend to gloss over the nights you spent awake, grinding your teeth, stressed out about whether the business is going to go under and all that. And if you have a team around you that you can trust and depend on, and you have history with, in our case, it helps you get through those times. And sure, there are stories out there of the lone founder, who's found success, but I think it's so much better whenever you can, bring a team to bear, and you're having an off week where you're not feeling it, and they're there to pick you up, and vice versa. So the fact that we've kind of carried this same team from business to business to business, it's been great that we've had four successful exits. But the fact that the four of us are still friends is probably the most amazing thing we've accomplished. We haven't managed to sue the living daylights out of each other.
That's really important. And you always hear, oh, invest in the team, not the idea. But I think you're kind of the living proof of what that actually means, right? And it's a group of people that find each other time and time again and can get through. I mean, ideation phase, taking company off the ground, and then exiting. Those are three completely different phases. And the fact that you can get through those multiple times and say, yes, we are all choosing to do this again, right? That says something about each of you individually, and then your ability to kind of succeed as a team. So I really think that's important. Is there any other kind of best decisions you want to share, or do you want to shift to the mistakes?
Well, the mistakes is the rough one. So we'll hold off on that one for just a sec. But
Okay.
I guess in terms of like an execution decision, the one that sort of comes to mind is our second business was Multiply. It was a big social network. On one hand, we were sort of Facebook before Facebook. We were the first social network to have a news feed. So we originated that concept, which is great. Congratulations to us. Unfortunately, we did not become Facebook. Through an odd set of circumstances, we became a huge e-commerce play in Southeast Asia. And that's a long and, and
Wow.
super interesting story. And it's not as crazy of a transition as it sounds on the surface. But it took us a very long time to sort of embrace our Southeast Asian e-commerce destiny, and rewind to like 2008 or so, when Facebook is marching to world dominance and starting to eat our lunch in our markets, Philippines, Indonesia. And so we made this huge pivot, and finally just started to listen to what our customers were telling us that we actually were. And we embraced our future as an e-commerce play. And literally within a matter of weeks, all we did was change our terms of service to make it okay for commercial activity to take place on Multiply. And we had a little sort of checkbox to say, I'm an online seller, and just put a little label below your headshot. And within a matter of weeks, we realized we had 50,000 merchants on our e-commerce platform that we didn't realize was an e-commerce platform. And, if you think back to 2008, 9, 10, it was a heck of a lot easier to monetize and get interest from suitors and
Yeah,
VCs and
well,
stuff
you know,
as an e-commerce play in an emerging market than it
yeah,
was as a social network.
yeah.
It was all about Facebook and Twitter. So that pivot was probably one of the best decisions, even if we sort of took our sweet time about making it, which made that business a pretty wild ride, to be honest.
Wow, that's really interesting. I find that entrepreneurs who truly pivot, it's you have to really kind of let go emotionally of the thing you thought you were doing, and that's hard. And so it's really interesting to hear your story. I'm sure like if we had like 2 hours, you could fill it with more details about that decision and all the good, the bad, and the ugly. But yeah, like I'm really glad for you to reflect and see view it as a positive. I mean, you took advantage of what your direct marketplace was telling you and asking you for. Even if it was even a little bit surprising after you made the switch. Oh
Yeah.
wow. Like we thought we were listening, but we had no idea how much, right? And so that's really interesting.
And
All right, go ahead.
fortunately, it's a good segue into the mistakes. And this could be like the next 3 hours.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Give us
But
give us give us a couple.
well, I've got a few, but that pivot is almost an example of one of the key mistakes is that, we at that time when we started Multiply, social networking was basically MySpace and Friendster, and it was they were sort of glorified dating sites, but the concept of a social network was very compelling to us. And so we were, at that time, 30 something guys, getting married, having kids. And so, MySpace and Friendster weren't appealing to us. So we built something on top of a social network that was appealing to us. So effectively, we were building a social network to share real content with people you knew in the real world, which sounds really cool now that we've been through decades of Facebook. But at the time, that was what we wanted, but it's not what most of our customers wanted, right? They wanted, to connect with everybody, the kid you sat next to in kindergarten for 2 months, and sharing pictures of your lunch. So, the mistake we made was mistaking ourselves for the target audience. And it took us way too long to sort of get past that and recognize, despite the fact that we came up with this amazing innovation and we're one of the first sites to really do something compelling on top of the social network construct, we were inhibiting our own growth by sort of forcing our point of view onto our customers and not letting them do what they wanted.
Interesting. Yeah, and it's again like we could definitely dive into this, but I appreciate you sharing that. I think I've talked to many entrepreneurs over my career, and that's a common theme, right? And it's a common theme for sure, and it is hard intellectually and emotionally to consider like kind of your blind spots, right? Like I might want this, but what do 18-year-olds want? Right? In this case.
Absolutely.
All right. So we have a few minutes left. I want to kind of zoom out a little bit. There's kind of two things that I'm curious about that I think we'll have time for. The first is you talked about, the ideation phase and, you've done it 4 times. And, you talked about some of the guardrails and the lessons learned. But at what point do you say, if ever, I am building this product or service, I'm building this company with a specific exit strategy in mind? Do you always want your because you've done it four times as your general on day one, has your exit goal or your North Star been looked very similar? Or do you say, okay, I'm gonna, go where the puck is. I'm going to solve a need. I'm going to monetize, from customer one. And then maybe I exit in 6 months. Maybe I never exit, right? Those are two different things. Like I'm going to build this thing. Or do you say the next thing I want to build, my goal is to exit in 3 years, let's say, how, how much is the exit strategy tied to the ideation phase?
In our case, I think it's almost none, to be honest with you.
None, really.
It's really, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, we're much more focused about monetization and revenue. And again, maybe that's just more a sign of the times, or our maturing as entrepreneurs. So our feeling is that, if you solve a customer problem, if you delight your customers, if you have if you're getting adoption and you have a clear path to revenue, or you're generating revenue, the exit will figure itself out. So I don't think we've ever been too focused on, what the exit might be or what the timeline might be. And, it's been kind of interesting. Other than the first company, our fantasy sports company got bought by CBS Sportsline, super logical, yeah, of course, that's the type of company that's going to buy a fantasy sports company. All three others, the acquisitions were almost completely out of left field. They were, the types of companies and timing that we never would have predicted. Like even the most recent one, New Relic, an observability company, bought our developer collaboration tool called CodeStream. You know, if you had asked us, when we first started the company, who are the logical suitors for this, we'd say, Microsoft or GitHub or, Google or, JetBrains. And we never would have picked, an observability company. And 3 years later, there you go. And that's kind of been a similar trend through the second, the second, third, and fourth businesses. The acquisitions were not at all what we would have anticipated out of the gate.
Interesting. I'm glad I asked you that question because I did not know that. I assumed the opposite falsely. So thank you for sharing that. And I do think, for all of those entrepreneurs listening, or, entrepreneurs or folks noodling on, should I ever start a company? Again, there's no, entrepreneurship is messy. There's no, if it was straightforward, everyone would do it. It's hard. It's, complicated. It's there's surprising. There's blind spots. But just to hear your thinking, okay, focus on the need, focus on the plan, focus on the team. And if there is a logical exit plan, it will reveal itself. I think that's really, really important. And so it's like my last question is, like on the other side of acquisition, because you 4 times now, and then we're not talking, New Relic, CBS. I mean, these are, large organizations that are, acquiring your startup. And that's, that's very, very different, Monday through Friday, how you spend your time, how you interact. You go from, owning the strategic decisions, and post acquisition, you still do own strategic decisions, but you're now part of a larger, web. And so, you've done that 4 times as well. And so just give me any advice on folks that find themselves in that position, because everyone's so much focus onto, make sure my company doesn't go under, make sure I get a good deal. And then you wake up and then the deal's done. And then, and, oh my gosh, now I'm part of this large company. And you want to be a productive member of that large company, right? You want to contribute to the product that you help bring to the world, because you're bringing your product to the world now, and it's in a massive way, and you care about that. So give us 1 or 2 thoughts on how to navigate that, for those that are thinking about doing that.
It's an interesting time. I mean, it's an exciting time. You just sold your company, and, in most cases, you're going into this deal, obviously, because, there's financial gain for you personally, but also, in most cases for us, the acquisition helped unlock the next level of success, right? So, we had tremendous success with that initial fantasy sports business, but when we married that to the CBS Sportsline brand, it was massive runaway train of success that defined the industry. So, those are exciting times. So the fun and excitement doesn't go away, once you get acquired, but, it's a huge change, right? So go from being one of a small group of people that are running a business to now, every deal and every company and every business is different, but now you're potentially just, one of many product managers at, Megacorp. And in our case, most times the acquired business sort of lived on as kind of a standalone business department entity within the bigger company. which has been good and bad. But what I've learned is that you kind of need to force yourself out of the mindset of a PM for a startup,
Mm.
even if the acquirer doesn't force you to, because your instinct will absolutely to be, not do that, to stay in your comfort zone, because
Mhm.
the startup mindset is 100% more awesome and fun and comfortable, and the big company mindset is frustrating and painful and often completely contrary to the get shit done mentality that
Mhm.
got you to where you are at that moment, right? But fighting against that and not actively embracing that is not good, because you're sort of doing things differently than the rest of the company. You're not sort of aligning your execution with the rest of the company, and sometimes I'll be the first to admit, sometimes it creates tension between you and the other PMs, because you're used to running the show, and they're used to playing by a different set of rules. Um, and even just simple things like, obviously it depends on how mature the business is when it gets acquired. But for most of our businesses, certainly 3 out of 4, we've sold fairly quickly in the 3 to 4 time year range, which I think is a pretty short
Yeah,
average.
absolutely.
And so we're still often in the mode of wearing multiple hats, maybe
Mm.
too many hats, which is another lesson learned. You got to get rid of those hats much more quickly than you think you should.
Mhm.
Um, and so, you may find yourself now in the context of a bigger company where you're doing all sorts of things that none of the other product managers at the company do, because, they have other people that handle those roles. And, you've got to embrace their way of doing things, even though can be a rough transition.
Yeah.
Just one example, like I've tended to play, even though I'm product manager by trade, I've also been kind of a engineering manager at most of our startups, just because that's the way it played out. And, uh, post acquisition, me playing that role was a big mistake. Has too focused on things that are too myopic, whereas every other product manager, they have dedicated engineering managers, so they're focused on what they should be focused on. So uncomfortable, but you've got to embrace the big company.
Yeah, yeah. No, I really like your view. It's like, regardless of what the acquiring company is asking of you in this regard, it's important for you to self proactively shift your mentality, even though it's uncomfortable. It doesn't have to be a switch. It can be over time, but it's really kind of that mental mindset. Okay. Now, like the biggest value that I can provide as a product manager of an enterprise is X, right? And then work towards X. And I think that's really really important. So with that, we're out of time. But thank you, Dave. This has been so much fun. I really appreciate all of your insights, and thank you for joining us today. And thank you to everyone for listening and watching.
Thanks for having me. It's been a blast.